doing that.
Okay, the button is blinking.
Yes, okay.
Do you think it's going up? Okay.
There you go.
Okay, good.
That's one of them. I'm gonna have to watch it before we.
Okay, so where do you want to start? What questions do you have?
Could we talk about retention in the rubric first? It seems to
Please,
be
let's do.
The burning question from Florence Wilson, that's why the question about the video.
Yeah.
We just have a lot of questions. Number one, should we base retention on the rubric and anything else? Or just the rubric?
Well, here's my concern, and here's what I've heard, and this is the first time we've used this rubric, but I've heard that we have some kids who may qualify based on this rubric, but they didn't qualify in your building for any interventions?
Yes.
Is that true?
Right.
How can that be?
Because we're basing our interventions on one test, like
Yeah.
the beginning of its letter naming fluency,
Mhm.
but they were green in letter naming fluency, so they didn't get any intervention. And so then we did it on PSF, and some of the kids passed that, but they're still not where they need to be with the rubric, or
So how
or
can they
they're
pass?
just now getting interventions because they didn't pass it.
Okay.
Of the
So-
12 Of the 12 kindergarten students that we have that we're thinking about retaining,
12 total?
12 total, okay?
Okay,
2 received no services, no tier.
okay.
8 get tier 2 and 2 get tier 3 based on the phonemic segmentation
Sure.
that was done with the Ames. So our concern is these children they don't have letters and sounds and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we go to? We just use the rubric, but they're not getting services.
Okay, clarify for me again, how many of those 12 are not?
2.
Only 2, okay. So how are they able to, I guess I don't understand this, how are they able to pass the?
They can do the phoneme segmentation, okay? They can do the CVC, they can say all the sounds. But they are not passing the rubric because on the rubric there's points, like there's 3 for the Ames, there's points, and they're not getting the letters and sounds points and maybe the math points. They're not getting enough points. If you look at the rubric,
But if they don't know their letters and sounds and they're not flagging on Ames Web? For phoneme segmentation?
They're doing okay with the phoneme segmentation test on
Which
the
is what
web.
we're basing our interventions
Right,
on,
right.
solely.
Yeah. And then if you have a limit of the number of children that your interventionist can work with, like they have 2, and then they have 6 in a group, that's 10. We've still got 2 children, they're not getting the basic tier service.
So those 2 kids did not flag for needing phoneme segmentation?
But they flag for letters and sounds, because they're not doing that.
I want to see some of that information. I may come to your buildings and look at
Okay.
that.
I have a student in my class who didn't qualify, was tier 2 in interventions for the first Ames test for letter naming because he named named an X. But because there was so many in tier 3 in kindergarten in our building that they didn't take any tier 2 at the beginning. And now for PSF, he got 8 beginning sounds. So he's tier 2, but he got red in every other category on Ames, tier 3 in every other category, but he's still only getting like 30 minutes because he got tier 2 on PSF.
Okay.
I have one who didn't meet either the letter naming or the phoneme segmentation, but she was slightly higher than the 6 that they're servicing, so she's not being serviced anymore. So she's
But they are
just
being
below.
flagged, but they're not, just because of
They don't fit
capacity in
the
your building.
groups.
Okay,
Because in order to meet the needs of the school, they moved the interventionists, and so now we have fewer students in kindergarten being serviced.
okay.
And so now she's not in the groups anymore.
That's something that I'm gonna have to come out to your buildings and really take a look at. And give them some time too, because I mean, this is still early, I mean, it's still January. So you still have a little bit of time. I know that you're talking to parents, a parent-teacher conference is the end of February, but really work with these kids and try to get them where they need to be. I mean, because we've got to make sure that we've got everything covered. and
What do
I'll
we
come
tell
out to your
the-
building.
What do we tell the parents though, if their child is, according to the rubric, needs to be retained but haven't had those interventions? What do we tell those parents?
Emily, how many kids do you have that are not flagged on Ames Web as needing any intervention, but they're still showing up here?
How many did I show you yesterday? 2 or 3 yesterday, I think. It was like 2 or 3.
Do you think, given some more time, they will be okay here on the rubric? Okay. That's something you need to talk to Raffaella about. Make sure that when I come out to your building that we kind of look at those so that we can see what's going to happen there. Hopefully I can get out there, soon so that we can talk about that.
If there's any way we could look at, there's that one rainbow graph where it shows all 4. If there's any way we could look at the whole piece. Because if they're low in letter sounds, they're not gonna have nonsense words and they're not gonna be able to read our test for, segmenting and blending
Right.
those sight words. So there's other things that are gonna come up on the rubric.
Mhm.
Letter names and sounds, and then that other test that they're not gonna do well on, and then that's just guessing too, that they also won't do well on DRA if they come across an unfamiliar
Right.
word. So that's three big time random things there on the rubric that it would hit. If we
Yeah.
don't take a look at that letters and sounds piece of the Ames.
Right, and we really need to look at that piece because we need to be serving those kids if at all possible. So to make sure to give them
Right
the.
now in the rubric, the Ames is basically 3 points pass in 2 and 1. So there's a lot of other things that go into account to add up, and that's a problem when you start checking your kids. Now, we should start in February, checking them on the rubric, if we think they need retention, if we've had some flags.
Right,
Should we keep going then up until enrollment time? Because we're gonna need to know who's gonna be retained, who's not. So, there's another question. Well, how long do we go with this?
according to the criteria, and I think that the committee considered that right underneath here, it talks about March, April. And I think they were thinking April is when we would really be making those determinations. But again, this is only January, but you do need to start talking to parents and, parent-teacher conferences. But you're not gonna know for sure until March or April. So, a lot of growth can happen with kindergarten students between that time. So we really need to get in there and push and see what we can do. So that's gonna be important.
At our school, we've been told that we need to have any referrals for SAT turned in by mid-January. And we're working on DRA this week, but like you said, children will continue to grow.
Mhm.
So when should we say, well, I really need more time to decide if I need to retain this child?
Referrals for SAT. Talk to me more about that.
Our SAT team, Sherry sent out an email saying that we needed to have any concerns turned into SAT by January, in the mid part of January.
There isn't a district
Okay.
recommendation that way. I mean, we don't have anything that
Well,
says
she
anything
said
like
the
that.
calendar school, so we just need,
Okay.
I just needed clarification because I do have one that I'm kind of concerned, and I think he'll make it, but if I have to turn the paperwork in already,
Is it getting served in interventions?
yes, but basically for language, he's one of my Somalians.
Okay, so
At our
I would say
school-
just keep working with them because you're not gonna know.
And we've talked about that, our school, I've said it year after year, because I was on SAT before, and
Mhm.
we were told you couldn't retain verse on language, but we do at our school.
Should a child have an ILP if they're gonna be retained? Should they be put through SAT?
If you're going to retain a child, after you make that decision, then you do need to write an ILP because it is board policy. Right now, this is just kind of a pilot for the board. They've given us 3 years to see if this works or not. They're really looking at it carefully. And we can't write this into board policy until they decide that they're okay with this. And like I said, they wanted that 3-year pilot. Well, currently in board policy, it says that if we're going to retain a child, we need to place them on an ILP. And I know that that's really kind of an old policy and needs to be fixed, but we can't really fix it until we decide if this is going to become board policy. So currently, yes, if you have a student that you do retain based on this, after you make that determination, then go to your SAT team, do an ILP to determine what you're gonna do differently next year with this child, is what that whole process is all about.
And I think
So,
we kind of have the same problem. We're under the gun, is we've got to get our kids in that SAT in order to talk about them, get them in on time. And they're getting pretty crowded this time of year, it gets pretty crowded.
So we could decide to retain and then fill out the IEP?
yes, yes.
So it's okay to wait on that?
Uh-huh, absolutely. And really, if you think about the purpose of SAT anymore, the way we're moving with MTSS and your collaborative team meetings, think about the conversations you're having with your group about your kids in your PLC meetings, collaborative team meetings, whatever you call them. You're really taking care of a lot of the needs that the kids have. Anymore, it's not so important that you take kids to SAT in the area of reading, because you're doing a lot already with intervention and things that SAT's not gonna be able to do very much for you. You're doing it all within your teams already. So that's probably going to be a process that will eventually phase out. We're not there in math yet. We don't have everything we have in place. We're still gonna have to take kids to SAT for math, and we're still gonna have to use that process for behavior. But for reading, we've got a pretty good plan in place right now. We're doing really well, and all of you in your buildings are doing a great job. So,
Last year, our SAT team, we had a kid in kindergarten that got retained because of parents, but he passed the rubric, but the parents pushed it through. So on the SAT team, we decided to not do an ILP since parents pushed it through. Is that yes or no?
well, board policy says that if they're retained, you need an
So
ILP.
he should have had one.
So you always wanna go with board policy because it's set by the board and it's
Okay.
policy.
And that's
So-
still acceptable if the parents say they want their child retained, that they can be retained even if they pass the rubric.
Yes. But if parents say no, they can't. I mean, if the rubric says they need to be retained, then parents can't say, I don't want them retained. That's why we've done all the parent communication pieces, and that piece has been so important this year, so I hope that you continue talking to parents. Because that's gonna be a little scary if you have one that you need to retain and you haven't been talking to parents about that, so.
I just wanted to make a comment. I think the rush for SAT would be one of the things is if you're wanting to refer a child for SPED, because in order for SAT process to be done, there is a cutoff date, and I don't remember what that date is.
I don't know.
For testing, so if you wanted to get that done, that's probably why they're wanting to do it so early in January.
I think it's in
So you have
April.
that time to fill out paperwork.
I think it's in April, because I'm on the SAT team, I'm pretty sure it's
So
in
if
April.
you have that time to see if those interventions are working and if not, so that they can be tested for SPED. As far as like we've been talking for retention, that could be done later on in the year.
Yeah.
But that would be a big rush for SAT.
And if that date is April,
That's the retention too, that's why I brought it up.
Okay.
Not just for SPED, because I don't feel like he's a SPED child, I think it's an intervention. And so I don't want to be told that I have to turn him in for retention by January.
no, that's too early.
I want to have some time for growth, and if he doesn't grow, then go through the SAT process, which
Yeah.
I always do. I think it works,
Sure.
but I need time
You do need time. Yep, you wanna give them all the time they can so they can grow.
Are special ed kids allowed to be held back?
That would be up to the ILP, or the IEP team. So this group does not have the authority to make that decision. I mean, that to me is kind of a double whammy. If you're gonna retain them and you're going to place them in SPED too. So that would be up to the IEP team.
We've had children at our school that are in SPED retained
That would be totally, and the parent would be part of that IEP team.
So if
So-
they're in sped, but they don't pass the rubric, is it still up to the parent then?
It would be up to that IEP team, which the parent is a part of. So, yeah.
If we have a child who is an IEP child and is not passing the rubric, how do we do that then? Then do we alert their sped teacher to that and then let her pull the team together or do that, or how do we?
Yeah, I would just let your special education people know. They can do what they want to with that information. Our stance on that is we're not going to retain special ed kids because of this rubric. But the IEP team can do whatever they want to with it, you know, if they want to deal with that, they can. So,
What about the ESL factor? If they get ESL and they're still low in the rubric, it should be decision made to retain.
that's a hard one. That's a really, really tough
ESL
one.
factor, I mean, and then they're low. If it's ESL, you know, it's hard to pick out if it's maturity, if
It
it's
is.
ESL, is it time, is it experience? You don't know.
Yeah.
Usually if they are ESL and they've been like in an English track classroom, then that would, you know, that's a good indicator for retention.
Okay.
But like in my case, if my students have been in the Spanish track and are transitioning, or they're newcomers, those are a language issue.
It's good information,
Correct
thank
me
you.
if I'm wrong.
That's good information, I think.
Yeah.
So,
And then what about a child that moves in on you? I have a child that came from Wichita, has been here not 4 weeks, and has his letters and sounds, but lacks a whole lot of other information that we need for the rubric, and we're really struggling with words and reading, and phonemic awareness is really down there, and segmentation.
In an English classroom setting.
Yes, he's my student in an English classroom setting. He's from Palestine, speaks Arabic, but a lot of English because he's been in school. But it's just a factor of brand new to me and us and ESL. So those two factors are hard. It's hard.
first of all, I would talk to parents,
Okay.
make them aware of the expectations, because they may want to be working with them at home. You do have some time. That time is on your side right now, it won't be later, but, make sure that you look at their Ames test, see if they qualify for interventions. You guys do have the walk-to intervention model, which is great, because you can, you know, decide what you want to do there and try to really support him there, so. Good questions.
It's a tough decision.
I
mean,
know.
It's hard.
Yeah. It's not easy talking to parents.
No, and it's a child's life.
Yeah.
You know, you just really have to be careful. You have to weigh everything.
Kindergarten teacher I used to work with said, kindergarten is the toughest job anywhere because you are the first person to tell a parent that their child isn't perfect. That's not easy. Wow. So,
So again, why are we using the screener versus a test, like DRA, to determine what, if they qualify for any services?
well, the screener really does give you an idea of whether or not your kids are on track. It's nationally normed, and it's just a good measure. Really, 100% of your kids should master PSF by the end of the year. That's really a goal, to have everybody there. And really, you guys do a good job with that. When you look at the spring benchmark testing, kindergarten usually is very high. So you guys do an awesome job with that. So that's really a goal.
But I guess my concern is in second grade, we have a very low class. And we're using a screener versus we're sitting at a level 3 on DRA.
Yeah.
So we need, I think DRA would be more important than the screener.
What we're finding is our DRA scores are showing some good growth, but at a certain point, they just stop. And it's because we've really not concentrated on our foundational skills enough, K1 and 2. You know, this year we've added 30 minutes of phonics. That has made a tremendous difference across the district. We just looked at our data in the last couple of days, and as a district, we improved 6.47% from fall to winter. And that's really a good movement of kids who have moved into Target. That doesn't take into account all the kids that moved out of Tier 3 into Tier 2 or whatever. But because we focused on those foundational skills, it's looking really good. Our third grade scores do not look good right now. And it's simply because I don't think we gave them the foundation we needed. You know, we didn't know. So we're doing much better.
I don't understand it.
Yeah. Okay, what else? But yes, I will be coming around to your buildings to check on those kids because I really don't want anybody falling through the cracks, that we retain them and they haven't been in interventions. That could cause us some problems. And we need to make sure that we've done everything we can to show the board that this is going to be successful. So I appreciate all your hard work on that.
Well, if there's any way to broaden the scope in the fall and catch some of those kids early, because it's really funny if you start intervention now, that they're a semester behind, rather than keeping them, you know, at least a pace.
That's right.
I had a lot of them that I knew were going to fall behind, but there was nowhere to go with them. So.
How could you differentiate in your core curriculum for those kids if they're not receiving interventions? Think about what supports you could do. And I don't know, I'm just asking you to brainstorm here. What are some things we could do to maybe beef up that piece of it? I know you're with your guided reading groups. So,
Well, something I've done more in phonics, because I have a lot of ESL kids in my class, is done a lot more pictures than just what the curriculum provides, because it gives those ESL kids an idea of what I'm talking about. You know, I'm not just saying it's a bat, let's, you know, break apart bat. I can give them a picture, and that seems to help them, especially with focus.
and if anybody has some great centers, please share with others. If you're finding a way to reach some of those kids.
I know in our collaborative meetings, our building's really been working on individual centers as to where, you know, you have your group centers, and if a kid is struggling and they're in interventions and they're still struggling, or if they got, you know, graduated from interventions, I know that we've been having teachers do individual centers for that specific need. Like if everybody else is working on, they know their letters, but this kid doesn't, then they're making individual centers. And I think that's going pretty well.
Good. And if you have any paras or anybody at all that's in your classroom during core, I don't think many of you do anymore, but if you do, and you could have them work with that student. You don't need an ILP to tell you what they need. I think you already know that. So,
But sometimes we're pushed to the limit that we're told not to do some of those things, that they're too easy.
I think you have to meet each kid where their needs are, especially like this kid, if you're gonna retain them and they're not in any interventions, and if you have a strategy that you know that kid needs, I think that's something that, if you could show growth on that, you may even wanna keep your own little graph to see if they're improving or not, so.
Something that I did with my kids who were struggling with the letter naming and the letter sounds was I got those mixed pages, and I gave them each one in their folder, and I told them, you know, you're working on letter sounds or you're working on letter names, and every time they go to a center, they pull it out and they go through the sheet before they start their center. So they go through that and they get that extra practice before they start working on whatever is coming next.
So what kind of sheet are you?
Just like with the mixed letters, kind of like the info looks like. It's just
What's the accountability for those? Like, how do you know that they're actually, like,
I have them pull it out when they come to guided because they're my first group, and I just listen. And if I hear anything that's wrong, I correct them. But other than that, it's kind of something they have to do on their own. It really is. I can't go over and make sure because I'm not guided, and I really don't have anybody else that can work with them. So it's really something that even pulled them out, and I know that they're doing them, I can't say that they're doing them correctly.
But even if you had peers who could work on sounds with other kids, I don't know.
I'm fine with the same thing you're doing, except I do it with a tape recorder, so I'm actually recording the sounds.
It's a good idea.
Learning, and so, and they're able to work on the tape recorder themselves. And I know they're doing it because they're over there and they're just here and you see it. So that would be accountability.
I think that is a great accountability for that.
Do you have them talking into a voice recorder?
I don't have them talking yet, I just have them listening.
Oh,
But
it's
they are
listening so they can
recorders.
follow along?
They can actually record themselves if I wanted.
Mhm.
I haven't gotten that far yet. It's just the listening part.
That would be a good next step, though.
Even the ABC song, we have it there. And I do the same thing with, only with the syllables. Like a little drill.
Okay,
Should we move to the next?
let's move to the next
All right,
one.
let's move to race.
Let's move to race. Well, I don't know, Jane, I'll let you talk about this. It came from Chris.
Oh, yeah.
You want to talk about it? I made one for everybody,
When
so.
we got the sheets, the posters for writing, we looked at, and Chris looked with us at what we thought kindergarten needed. So we have these, and we use these when we do our writing. And I think we'll just give everybody one.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. And we've just got started with this, okay? So know that. That we just he just got the posters back to everybody. Then he did this, fixed it up for us. We told him what we wanted for kindergarten, and he went through. And it's just a good piece to do with your writing. Now, I know you can't do everything all the time, but there are some skills in here that we thought we should pick up, and it kind of gives us a consistency, okay, of how to go about it. But I think everybody ought to have one.
That came right off your PowerPoint,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's right off your PowerPoint.
Right. Do you have this like this?
Not
This is
Not the, not
Ours
this
are
one.
different.
not this one. This is kindergarten.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different, and our person who was on the writing committee, Chris Corby, he just went to bat for us. But it kind of gives you a sequence, and it's something you can follow, and we're experimenting and working with it. In fact, he just got ours in on the board today, so we're up and running, we're trying, so.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's pretty cool.
Oh yeah, pretty cool is right, when somebody will come down and do something for you
Yeah.
just for kindergarten.
Yeah.
That's a blessing, yeah.
We're supposed to do this like in addition to our 30 minutes.
You know, people have asked a lot about the race strategy. When do I do it? What is it? Think about this strategy as what it is, a strategy. And it's no different than any of your metacognition strategies that you would use for Houghton Mifflin. You know, clarify, monitor, question. It's a strategy just like that. Sure, the first time you use it, you're probably going to have to spend a little more time on it. Think about that gradual release of responsibility. When you're teaching, take a day in writing or whatever and teach the strategy. You're going to have to do a lot of modeling, guided practice, and they're not going to be able to do it alone for the first few times. You're going to have to do that modeling and guided practice with them. But it is only just strategy. So don't think of it as a big, huge project that you have to do.
I just have a question for like all the teachers who are more experienced than me. So like everyone here. How, like with a gradual release, how do you get them to like let go? Like I try all the time. I'm like, I can't tell you, I can't break the word down for you. You can segment the word yourself and sound it out and write it. Like you don't need me to sound it out for you so you can write the sounds that you hear. You can do it yourself, and it's like constantly they want me to do it, and like I won't because I don't want them to have that like learned helplessness or anything. But it's so hard because it's like constant.
Yeah. Who wants to answer that one?
Well, I will tell you, that's all we've taught. It doesn't go away year after year. It doesn't go away. And I look at my students. Some can and some can't. And those that can't, I work with them a little harder. I do a little more for them with that particular piece. So I just have to figure out my kids and where they are with their writing, and then they can do it. And when they see the other kids doing it, sometimes, like you say, peer helpers, sometimes if you whisper in the ear of somebody, they might help you with some of the sounds or something like that to write. So sometimes you just let that happen. I just kind of figure it out with the class I have, what I can do and how much I can get done. But it's different every year, and it's still a challenge. It is a challenge.
Writing was hard for me with my first graders. So it's hard to get them to be independent.
They just want you to, like, because they're really good, like, almost everyone in my class, like, they can, if you say, like, sounding out a word, and you're, like, telling them the sounds, you know, they can write it down. But if you just say the word, like, kick, be like, well, and they'll write, like, they'll get the first sound, they'll get, like, K, and they'll just, like, write a bunch of letters after it. I'm like, well, what sounds do you hear? Kick. And they're like, K. I'm like, so then what comes next? And they want you to, like, K, eh.
And you guys are following this, correct?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because it kind of goes through the developmental pieces of what to expect when, and, you know, and some of that is normal with them, but.
Do you tie it to your phonics? Because like, we were talking about middle, beginning, middle, and end
Right, so
sounds.
we're working on middle.
Yeah.
Right now. Yeah. We're trying. They get it. But, and like when we're doing whole group, and I'll like give them like all the words that are in like Hoot and Mifflin, and we'll be like, well, we're looking for the middle sound. And they'll tell me right away, and I'm like, well, then during writing, why can't you do that? So, okay.
I think it helps if there's an ABC strip on their folder or on their desk, because that's a lot to try and figure out what the sound is, and so then what that letter is, and then what that letter looks like. So if you can help them with something right there, they don't have to look up and find, it's just right there. Sometimes that helps too.
Okay.
That they could, you know, cut in, oh, that's an I, let me see, where's the I on here? Sometimes that makes it easier for them too. And that also sometimes sends a message that, you try it on your own, you have your information right here, and I'll come check on you.
When you model for them, do you use the temporary spelling, or do you spell everything correctly?
No. I do, like, I'm, like, thinking out loud, like, metacognition, like, what sound do I hear? And we kindergarten spell everything, just the sounds that we hear.
Well, no, we did lessons on how to be a brave speller, and I made a poster and I hung it up there. Number 1, you don't ask the teacher. and they don't follow that rule. 2, say it slow. 3, stretch it out. 4, write down the sounds you hear, and it's all written up there. And like the other day, somebody came up, how do I spell? And I just pointed to the poster.
What poster is that?
Yeah.
What's your brave
I just
speller?
put down how to be a brave speller. And number 1 is don't ask the teacher.
Number 1 is most important.
Number 2,
Yeah.
say it slow, and I got a picture of a turtle up there. Number 3 is stretch it out, and I have a picture of a snake. And number 4 is like write down the sounds you hear. But I like explicitly taught that process, and then we have the poster up there. And like I said, the other day when somebody asked, I just pointed at the poster.
Remember the poster?
But something I've learned is sometimes you have to differentiate your expectations. Like we were working on swim, and I have some kids who can hear all 4 sounds and write it down. And I have one little guy, all he got was the beginning and the ending. And I'm like, that's good, that's what he can handle. I'll do a happy dance on that one. So, you know, even with advantage, you gotta kind of think about that.
I spend more time with my children who struggle with writing too sometimes, and that's just because the others, once they get to be independent, they're really happy to be independent. So I just make it a goal to spend more time with those reluctant readers and writers. You just gotta pull them along.
And like I have a student, at least one student, who's really, really smart, but he loves the one-on-one attention, so he pretends that he doesn't know what comes next,
That's my entire high group.
what what to do. So like when he does do it on his own, I try to like celebrate that like more because he did it on his own than when he comes to me and he's like, and I'll be like, I don't know.
Oh, funny.
I had one today that came up to me and was like, how do I write name? And I was like, well, he found it out. And he's like, is it N-A-M-E? I'm like, yes.
Wow, I'm impressed.
Why are you asking me?
I couldn't get first graders to do that.
So as a district, there's no how many times they want us to do race in a week or once a day or once a week.
We
Like,
are
is there any-
currently, I'm gonna pull principals together. They will make a decision what they think. I mean, I don't know. There's nothing really set in stone yet, but I'm gonna pull them together and see what they think. So, it's good to have elementary be consistent, because it just is. We've got so many schools.
We get so many kids moving from one.
Yeah,
to
we
the
do,
other.
really, yeah.
I got a kid from after.
Yep, so we'll try to get that consistent.
You guys want to stop and restart your thing before we start the next thing?
Oh, I was supposed to go.
Otherwise, you'll stop in the middle